Awesome Rider Wiki.
Hey YouTube, Awesome Rider here. Welcome to my review for Kishiryu Sentai Ryusoulger Episode 2. This guy's still not ace, so he's a disappointment. This review is hopefully going out a little more on time. Sorry last week's premiere review was a little bit late, but it lined up with all the toys coming out and then the Beast X Morpher, so it ended up coming out later than I wanted. But let's talk about Episode 2. I thought it was a pretty solid episode. I was actually really surprised, and to be fair, I don't think I watched the preview for last week's episode, but that doesn't necessarily matter. But I was kind of surprised that they didn't debut Green and Black today. I mean, we got another hint at them at the end. I do kind of dig that, given though that we spent basically the first two episodes on the core team of 3, or the original core team of 3, it made me kind of wish even more that it was just kind of almost structured into more of a two-part pilot. I mean, I guess it kind of was like that in this episode. This was kind of like a combination of our first sort of standard, like what an episode of the week's gonna be like episode, but also we was like setting up this sort of status quo of the side characters and their relationship to the Rangers and stuff like that. But it just kind of made me more so wish that they had just structured it a little bit better in terms of that, given that we weren't doing Green and Black this week. But I also kind of like that. It seems like we're doing them next week, you know, not like that. But you know, getting to actually introduce them. But I almost kind of wish, given that they're doing that they let it go maybe to like episode 4. Like, since they are actually waiting, I thought it's kind of a cool idea to make that like a little mini arc, like the journey to finding these guys. And then maybe you do like, I mean, they probably wouldn't do this, but like an episode that just solely focuses on Green and Black before they all meet. Or maybe that will be next week's. I think that would be cool. Or maybe an episode that just puts them in the mix a little bit, but we get to see them functioning on their own. I don't know, I do kind of like that, but there's things that kind of bug me about it too. Not that we didn't get them first, but it's just we could have had more time with the core 3. Speaking of, I mean, I feel with both episodes, and it's kind of unfair to judge this early on, but there's something I want to bring up about that, but I feel like we still don't have a really good idea about them other than they're just kind of general, like, animated personality quirks. And I feel like both episodes kind of leaned heavier on Red in terms of just his character, but I still feel like, given that these first 2 episodes were kind of about the core 3, I wish we would have gotten to know a little bit more about the characters, a little bit better of a feel for them than just kind of, again, their general personality quirks. And I'm really sorry, I don't remember who said it, but somebody had asked me, like, what I thought did a better one-episode pilot, this or Beast Morphers. And honestly, this isn't a Sentai versus PR one's better than the other, because I honestly did enjoy both episodes. I might sound critical in the reviews, but I mean, it's a point of a review. But, like, honestly, I liked both episodes. But I think, just, you know, speaking critically, I think Beast Morphers did a better job of setting up the characters in a first episode, because like with both Ryusoulger and Beast Morphers, we got an idea for their personalities, but with Beast Morphers, honestly, I'm still kind of impressed about it, thinking back on it, how they didn't make it feel forced, but they actually gave us a little bit of a potential trajectory for their characters. Like, we got to know who their characters were, like personality-wise, and then we got a little bit to know about their motivations, and kind of could think like what their storyline could be. And that's not just for the core 3 Rangers, but for Blaze and Roxy as well. But with Ryusoulger so far, I feel like I don't have a good idea about what drives the characters. You know, and again, it's only 2 episodes in, but it would have been nice to get at least a little bit of that, since while we have just the core 3 together. But you know, again, early on, I just kind of something I happen to think about, since this episode again kind of leaned on Red a little bit. Also, something I want to bring up real quick before I forget, I forgot to mention this last week, but it's interesting that the way they're doing Red and Black, and how we already seen that they're obviously morphed and established, I had assumed that if we in any way intersected with Super Sentai Battle, that actually took place later in the timeline. But now I think it's interesting that it's possible that, actually, it's probably true because Master Red was still alive, but I think it's interesting now, confirmed, that Super Sentai Battle took place before the events of Ryusoulger. Because I thought it was going to kind of be one of those situations where we would eventually catch up to it, if we ever did anything with that. But I think that's kind of interesting, and I'll be interested to see, like, if that comes into play, and if it does, would it be in the show, or might they reserve it for a movie or something? I don't know, but I just thought that was worth noting, and I completely forgot to mention it last week. Okay, so this week's episode kind of established the status quo of how things would work. It kind of gave you a retread of some of the mythology introduced last week, but also introduced some new elements to it. I do think it's interesting, which I can't remember I'm sure there is, but I can't remember very many Sentai seasons where you have essentially like the master group of enemies and like the henchmen, and I'm not talking about like the putty henchmen, I'm talking about like the, you know, the monsters. So you have like the Dreadons, who are like the aliens that went into space and then came back, and then the Minosaurs, which are like the grunts, you know. And I think that's interesting just because that's not something we see a lot. And honestly, a lot of the elements of the way the monsters of the week seem to be working remind me of Rider. Because Rider will sometimes have, I'm gonna use O's as an example. You had the Greeds as like the leader big bads, and then they created the Yummies, which were like the monsters of the week, via humans. And this actually reminds me a great deal about that because the Minosaurs are created out of human despair, not despair, that's O's, but like, well, kind of, yeah, negative human emotions. They're created out of that. And because I remember thinking that was very Rider-esque when I read it in the scans, and I thought the humans might actually transform into the monsters, but it's very much like the Greeds and the Yummies where they pour goo into their mouth. That didn't happen in O's. And then, you know, it creates the monster, the Minosaur, and like the way that works, combined with the way this episode felt, where you're focusing on the character who's tied to the monster and their personal storyline, was very Rider-esque in terms of the classic I mean, it was one episode, but like the classic 2-episode story arc where we focus on a character we're never going to see again, as it pertains to the monster. So I thought that was kind of interesting, just of note. The best thing about the series, 2 episodes in, continues to be the mecha battles, I think. This week was the proper debut of the standard form. Again, I did kind of like that I thought this would debut first and then we would get the 3-Knight formation, but they did it differently, and I kind of liked that in a way. But it was just really fun to watch. Like, I've said this before in reviews, and I said this last week, but I really hope they continue this because I think that's one of the series' strong suits, especially as we go on. The general battle structure in day-to-day episodes can become very tedious, and so having mecha battles that are not only just pretty to watch, but also interesting to watch, I think could really set the series apart and keep things interesting. I mean, we got a little mini fight with just Tiramigo on his own. He's like, extreme Tyranno cannons, and then, you know, you got this guy with the full acrobatics, and it's just, they're more entertaining, more dynamic to watch. It's not just like, oh, you know, I hit you, you hit me once, twice, like almost like an RPG, and then the finisher. I mean, I'm sure there'll be episodes like that, but I think that they're some of the best mecha fights we've seen in a long time, and again, I hope they continue. And they even threw into the mix the on-the-ground rangers using some of the ability souls on the monster. It wasn't very effective, but I liked that, and I don't think that would work every week, but I wouldn't mind that being in the mix. Maybe even if it was just something like a restrained soul or something, or like the stretchy one, and they can restrain it temporarily, and they're a little bit of a help. And I think that especially works in a series like this, where you have mecha where just red could be piloting, or you'll have red, pink, and blue, and green and black are on the ground. So like, that way you make use of people that wouldn't necessarily need to be in the main cockpit. So I hope that continues, because just as a superficial kind of visually entertaining element, I think that's one of its strong suits so far. They debuted a couple of the ability souls. We had the Stank soul, and then we got the listening soul. Like, it's very obvious toy sales stuff, but that was about it for that. There was also something I wanted to mention in regards to last week of the sounds of the toys, which I talked about a little bit in my review too, but I think I said this in last week's, but I do think that Ryusoulger has done a solid job of differentiating its general vibe from the other Dino seasons. You know, because obviously when we got the scans, it was very much Kishiryu elements. There's elements from all the different seasons, I think, to some extent. But I think they've established their own tone in regards to that. Like, I feel the night vibe, they lean on it enough that it makes it feel different. But then I feel that the very Kishiryu sounds just don't gel well then for me for that. Not that I hate them, and this might not be true for everyone. You might love the sounds or don't really care. But just for me, the fact that they've done such a solid job differentiating the night vibe, and then you have basically Kishiryu sounds, it just doesn't fit the night vibe for me. Especially with the, you know, I'm sure it's kind of adorable, the little keys dancing in the henshin, but it's just like, it's such an obvious Kishiryu thing. And I kind of wish, like, I get what they're going for. They really want to make sure that they, quote-unquote, save Sentai or just get their sales up, so they're doing everything they can to, you know, boost that familiarity. But I just kind of wish they had worked a little bit harder to balance it, where you're still hitting those Kishiryu notes enough to pander, but also letting it have its own identity in terms of the sounds. Because just for me, the basic Kishiryu sounds just don't fit it. For me, I just wish it was a little bit more nighty. Like, I don't know, maybe that's just me, but I just wish there was a little bit more of a balance. It could still even be that crazy screaming kind, even though it's not my favorite, but just, maybe we'll see that later on with power-ups or something, but I'd like to see it just balanced a little bit. But I wanted to mention that before I forgot it. But overall, I thought this was a solid episode. It wasn't the best, you know, for so early on. Like I said, I wish we would have gotten a little bit more about the Rangers instead of focusing on this whoever in the hell nonsense guy of this week. I don't really care about him because we're never going to see his character again, as far as we know. But it was still solid and enjoyable mecha fight. I'm looking forward to next week to seeing Green and Black introduced and how that's handled exactly. You know, whether they join the team right away or we might have separate stories and stuff like that. I'm sure it'll be fairly soon they join the team, but I'm at least looking forward to seeing how that shakes out and exactly why they left, when their tribes left, and stuff like that. But solid episode, I'd give it a 7. Anyway, until next time, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and climb the steps and ring that bell to get notifications for all my videos. Until next time, Dawson Ryder, signing out.